Hello and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is Monday, the 13th of September, 2021, and my name is Kerry Holzman. Thanks you guys so much for joining me. Today is going to be a bit of an unusual show as I start performing a bit of an autopsy on some older tower computers that I've got here, and we'll just use this as a lesson in the history of where we were and where we are now in how computers are built, which should lend an idea to which direction we're moving in. And I've got 3 of these older machines to dismantle. These are all going to the recycler, and I thought it might be fun to dismantle them and give you guys an idea that, you know, there wasn't always cable management. There wasn't always liquid cooling. There wasn't always a case window. This was pretty much the way they looked. It's yellowed quite a bit over time. And as you can see from the back, we still have a printer port back there. We have a modem in there. And of course, I built more of these than I can shake a stick at. A long history of building computers professionally since 1991. And this is actually quite small compared to the computers I was building in 1991. They were about 3 feet tall. So this is not that old. You can see it still has a floppy drive up front. And the reason I have this one is the customer has asked me if I can pull data off of the hard drive. It's been sitting probably in a closet for years, forgotten. And since I'm building a computer for them, they gave me their current computer, which is also old, but not this old. And they want the data off of that one. This one, the customer says, look, if you can get the data, that's great. If you can't get it, don't worry about it. So I have no idea what's lurking behind the panels. And then I have 2 more older than this. Well, one of them's older than this one. And that one's going to be interesting because that one's been sitting outdoors for about 4 years. Hopefully nothing's crawling around inside of it. But this is a great example of what everybody had. This is probably circa maybe early 2000s. It's got an Intel Celeron sticker, depending on which model that is. Even that sticker design would suggest it's early 2000s. We've got a CD drive, not a DVD, with a volume control so you can plug headphones into the front of it to listen to your CDs. So let's take it apart and see what's in here. I'm kind of anxious to see. I have no idea. Like I said, the computer was just brought to my attention here over the weekend, and I have never ever seen it before. But it does bring back some memories. Now that's interesting. They put the wrong screw in here. That's not the right screw. Doesn't matter. You'll see even the way we mounted the power supplies was different. And you'll notice we have a power output here. We've got an input and an output. And the idea was that you would run the cable from the output here on the back of the power supply to the back of your monitor. What if you had 2 monitors? Nobody had 2 monitors. It's pretty rare. And if you had 2 monitors, you obviously would plug one in the wall. But anyway, let's take a look. Let's take this side off first. This is unusual. Normally the holes would go on the other side. So I think this panel was supposed to go on this side. I bet you they got the panels backwards, because that's for breathing. Now the panels, those are good recyclable material right there. That's just steel, and I think you get a penny a pound for steel. At least that's what it was. Cost you more in gas to take it to the recycler. Let's take a look. What do we have in here? We've got a value line power supply. We've got a speaker down here so the PC can go beep. We have a mechanical drive, looks like a Western Digital Caviar. The floppy drive, the CD drive and hard drive are IDE cables. And we've got a motherboard with a VIA chipset on it. And wow, yeah, this thing is old. Let's find out what we've got in here. I love taking stuff apart. I'm really, really good at it. Don't mind if I brag. It's the putting it back together that I have a hard time with. So we're just going to pull all the cables, data and power off all of these front drives. You'll also see back in the day we used to have an audio output cable that went on to the sound card or the motherboard, depending on what was providing your sound. And that was analog sound, the same as what came through the headphone jack. Nothing is analog anymore. We don't do that anymore. And then we can go ahead and remove all of these screws on this side, and we'll just pull them out of here real quick. And you see, things don't sit well in these cases. This was a cheap case, and back then, nobody cared. Nobody cared what the case looked like, because for the most part, they all looked alike. Did you want this beige box or that beige box? And most times people said either one, either beige box is fine, with some exceptions. Now, that's the rest of what was holding in the CD drive. Remember, CD only. There were no DVDs at this point in time. And this is the DVD drive we've got. Oh, look at that, light on, an LTN242. Do we have a manufacturing date on there? 1997, July. If you look down by my fingers, July 1997. This optical drive is probably older than many of my viewers. This is 24 years old. 24. I've got underwear older than this. In fact, I'm wearing them right now. It's too much information. Western Digital Caviar 33100 mechanical hard disk drive. Let's see if we got a manufacturing date on this bad boy. September 96. September of 96. That's 25 years old. You think I'm going to be able to pull data off of this? We're going to find out in a little bit, but we'll set it here for now. Treat it like glass. Treat all mechanical hard drives like glass. Then over here, I think we have a couple more screws holding the floppy drive in. This is your standard 1.44 megabyte floppy disk drive. I can't tell you how many of these I've installed in my life. Too many. I don't miss them, especially with how unreliable they were. You'd get a floppy disk, you'd put your data on it, you go to read it back, it'd give you a read error, throw the thing in the garbage, start again. And every time they read a sector, they chick, 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 chick. They had this annoying clicking sound. You turn the thing on and brrr, chick, 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 chick. Yeah. I don't see any date on this, but this is the old school 1.44 megabyte floppy disk. Now, I can't imagine why anybody would want to recreate a machine like this. As far as I'm concerned, we can make a video in HD, show all the details of everything, and you would have no reason to ever want to preserve something like this. It's also been really neglected, and this would make it even more difficult to restore back for historical reasons. And there's no shortage of these. You know, when these were made back in late 90s, these were made, you know, by the hundreds of millions. So it's not like we have to preserve it. I'm, again, going to just keep pulling cables off. Wow, that one didn't even want to come off. Oh, I see. This one. So back in the day, we're going to use that term, back in the day, if you were lucky, you had an IDE or a floppy drive cable with little clips on the sides. And these broke off all the time. But it's what would happen when Dell or HP or any of those big name manufacturers would ship. A lot of times these cables would come loose, and some would take to using a hot melt glue gun. But these clips were a much better idea. So when you saw me pulling on it and it wasn't coming out, you notice I didn't just rip it out with brute force. I stopped, looked deeper at what was preventing it from coming out, and then noticed those clips. They're not common. The IDE cable does not share that. You'll see here. When we used to hook up hard drives, you had two connectors that were somewhat close together and one further away. The one furthest away went to the motherboard, and you'll notice there's a red stripe on one side. That signifies pin 1, and that's how you knew which direction to plug on your cable, even though they also had a notch. But the people building the cables wouldn't know. They needed some indication of which side was pin 1. And then you'd have a master drive on the end here and a jumper on the back of the hard drive. And then you could put a secondary or slave drive. So you'd have a master and slave hard disk drive. And then that would plug into the motherboard. And then you would move a jumper on the back of the mechanical drive to signify if it was the master or the slave. Now, we also have, back in the day, we used to have speakers on the bottom of the cases. And these just gave you your PC beeps back the original IBM PC. Didn't have a sound card. This was your sound card back in the day. Not in this day, but 15 years before this, back in the 80s or certainly the late 80s, and there was no sound cards. And so all your sounds came through the PC speaker as just beeps. Let's go ahead and take the power supply out now that I've got everything on. Well, did I unplug the motherboard? I think I unplugged. I don't know. We'll find out. It's the same screws and the same size of the power supplies that we utilize today. However, the design is very different. We've moved away from this design. The technology has evolved quite a bit. And I'm going to kind of rush through this because I have 3 of them to do here, and disassembly is relatively straightforward on these. Now, I missed the motherboard power connector. I couldn't see it because the power supply was in the way. Notice there's only one power supply power connector. It's a 20-pin, not the 24-pin that we use today, nor is there a CPU power, nor are there any SATA connectors. Those did not exist. And the details on the power supply, if we bring it up to the camera, we should be able to read. It's a 250-watt power supply, and I don't see a date on it. And you notice we have the fan here, and this fan is blowing air out. It's sucking air in. It's the exact opposite of the way power supplies move air today. Blowing air out that side, out the back. We've got a video card. What do you think that's worth today? $200? It's a GPU, ladies and gentlemen. I know you've heard of them, and you've only seen them on display. You've never actually held one in your hands, right? Because of the outrageous prices people want for GPUs this day. So, but you wouldn't want this one. This one is an Agp graphics card, Advanced Graphics. What's the P? Peripheral. And as you can see, this is an S3 graphics card, the S3 Trio 3D2X, and that's how they used to make them back in the day. And you can see they could have added more RAM up here, and then you just had one video output, VGA, pretty standard stuff. And then what we have here is just your old school, everyday, ordinary modem, which is really in there for some reason. I don't know why. It should just pop right out of there, but it's stubborn. Now these slot covers I can still use in cases today. I'll keep the slot covers. Definitely will reuse those. But here's our modem. And you'd run your telephone into one jack and then your line to the wall into the other, so that way you could still use your phone. Joshua says Agp was an advanced graphics port. Thank you, Joshua. I don't know if we have any dates on the back of this, but it certainly has seen better days. And there's some kind of label on the back here. If it'll focus. It focused for a minute. Come on, camera. There you go, 56K. By the way, you could never get a 56K connection. It was against FCC rules. You could do, I think, 53, and even that was receiving only. You could only send it like 33, I don't know, something like that. So in here, we've got the motherboard and the CPU fan. We have one stick of RAM. Let's take that out and see what we've got here. Here's a stick of something. One stick of RAM. Yeah, and this was probably 90 bucks or something back in the day. 64 megs, 64 megs, and it's a SIM. It's a single inline memory module, not a DIMM. It's not dual inline, it's single inline. That's called a SIM, S-I-M-M. Now, as far as the motherboard goes, this looks like even these screws have come out. I'm going to crank the torque up on this driver because that noise is driving me crazy. But I will dismantle everything that'll come apart on this. Look, even the, looks like the rear I/O has a cover on it that holds this rear I/O in place, because back then all motherboards basically had the exact same rear I/O. You believe that? You didn't have a custom I/O shield for your motherboard. They all used the same ones, and then there would be punch outs that you could punch out if your board had, in this case, networking. You notice there's no built-in network on the back of this board. There was nothing to network to. You didn't have DSL. You didn't have cable modems. So in order to hook this up to a network, you'd probably use like a 10-base-2 connector using coaxial cable on an internal network. There was no such thing back then for home users as a WAN, a wide area network. It was always a local area network. And even then, you didn't use it to share your internet. You used it to play Duke Nukem. Well, that's what I used it for. And then we got a lot of dust up here. Now, I told you guys back in the day, we used to mount motherboards with those little plastic standoffs, and then maybe like one screw to secure the board. And what there would be were those little cutouts in the board, or there would be holes that you would push the standoffs through. So there's a little plastic standoff right here where I'm pointing the screwdriver. There's another one down here, over here, and those just go through, and when you put the motherboard down, it clicks onto them, and it's got, you know, a little, you have to use a pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, and squish them down to get the board out. It's a real hassle. You'll notice we also have a couple of screws here that's holding the motherboard tray in, and I think it'll be easier if I just take the whole tray out, and we'll see what that does. Come on now. Come on now. There we go. And there's two more on this side right here. And this way you could put the motherboard on the tray, get everything mounted, and then put the whole tray into the case. There's still cases made like that today. They generally are more expensive. This was considered a cheaper case. And you'll see it's got little tabs right here that slide in. You see right here? It slides in right up there. That locks it in. And then this is our board. Get a gander of that beauty, huh? That's what I'm talking about. It's the 90s, baby. And you had to worry about Y2K. What are we going to do when Y2K comes around? And via chipset drivers, huh? Those were the days. SIS drivers, via chipset drivers. Where'd they go? Now, if you look at the board carefully, you'll see those little plastic standoffs popping through the mounting holes. You'll see one here. You're going to see one probably, yeah, right there. If we come across, that one's in the middle, it's not even being used. So there's really just one screw holding this entire board. If you come around the back here, you'll see there's a brass standoff right, where is it? Can you spot the brass standoff? Do you see it? There it is, right there. That's the only thing securing the board apart from those plastic standoffs I showed you. One screw. That's why I have so many of those little plastic standoffs left over from the 90s. So we're going to take that one screw out. So I got the two plastic standoffs here. I got the one screw right there, right in the middle, on the outer edge of the board. And it's a little one, little baby one. We usually use those for hard drives. The reason we use the short ones for hard drives is if you were to put a screw in back in these days, if you put a screw in on the side and it was too long, it would hit the edge of the circuit board and short out your hard drive. So we always had to make sure we used shallow, coarse threaded hex head Well, they didn't have to be hex head, but they were coarse threaded screws. Now to release the board, you know, before this we used to have like a little keyhole and the board would slide up and down with the standoffs. But we also had what you're witnessing here. These standoffs in my world were not quite as common, and there were a couple different ways that they would be installed. So one way is just what you're seeing now, where they're pushed in with a flat side. The other way was that they were threaded and you'd screw them down into the motherboard tray, and then the other end was exactly the same and you press the motherboard down. Let me grab my needle nose pliers. And we can take these out by simply squeezing them closed and lifting up on the board, or pushing down on them to push them out. Either way, whichever you prefer, whatever works for you. And this is something that takes a little bit of practice. And back in the 90s, I didn't need my glasses to do this. See, a lot of things have changed. Probably more will change too, but I won't notice it because I can't see. No, the standoffs can be a burden or a bear when you're trying to remove several of them, because as you start to release one, if you're not careful, others will just pop back down, and like that one just did. And it's a talent you will learn if you do it every day. You get really good at it. Now I'm out of practice, so bear with me as I struggle and work harder than I should. You see how I have to keep it lifted up. There should be one more here. Yeah, if I can get it out of there. Sometimes the plastic will bend down, yeah, and that just makes it even more fun. And that one went back in. That one just looks like it needs to be turned. So close. Come on now, baby. Come on. There we go. Okay, so here's your motherboard tray with all your plastic standoffs as I've described. And when you see me use the plastic standoffs in the future, you'll understand why I have so many. Now here's our board. And some of the things carry over that are the same today. But you'll notice the BIOS chip, which is right here. It's a socketable BIOS chip. You could pull that out, say if you had a flash go bad. This was when you had to worry about flashes going bad. There's a little sticker covering up a little window underneath this, probably. And you can use ultraviolet, there's a blue light, to program these electronically erasable, programmable read-only memory, or EEPROM. And they cover that up so that it doesn't get erased by some rogue ultraviolet light, which would never ever happen by mistake. But anyway, there's people who think you have to have that. And then we still run the same CR2032 battery to hold the date and time when the machine's powered off. And that's our chipset. Now a BIOS chip today is about 1/30th that size. It's a little teeny tiny chip, surface mounted onto the board. Up here we've got a weird looking cooler, and we'll pop that off and see what chip we've got underneath there. But look at that cable management, huh? You just pop it on there, you're done. So I don't know how this, oh, I can see how this cooler comes off. It's got a little, move that out of my way. It's got a little catch on it right there. And if we pull that, you push down in a way, and it should lift it out. So let me go over here, and we'll do that right now. Now, as for the rest of the case, we can take the front bezel off. We can take out even these metal trays. Like this cage right here will come out. This will come out. And then if we want to recycle the power button and LEDs and use it for testing, like you see me do, that's often where I grab them from. I take an old case like this, and I'll pull this whole harness out. This whole harness right here is connected to a switch. There's no circuit board. It's just a physical switch and LED here. And I'll just take those and reuse them. So let me set this down. And let me grab, let's see, what am I going to need? A small screwdriver here. And we should be able to push down in a way on this connector. I don't know why I'm worried about breaking it, because it wouldn't matter, but I'm going to try and do it the way I used to back in the day. Just push down on it with something and then pull it away with a flat blade screwdriver. Once you've done that, I was going to put this away, but then I realized I'm probably going to have to separate it with something. The thermal paste is probably stuck on there good. Now this is an Intel stock cooler. Back in the day, now I don't recall seeing one like this, but clearly they must have existed. And this was, at the time, one of the cheapest Intel modern processors you could buy, the Celeron line. So it was relatively slow compared to other chips that were available at the time, and significantly cheaper in price as a result. And so people who were shopping for price, you know, regular home users, couldn't care a rat's behind about any benchmarks. Nobody was measuring their frames per second in Duke Nukem. Just wasn't happening. And the thermal paste is interesting. It's got like a thread. It looks like a sheet. It's like a weird, again, this is new to me here. This was probably stock from Intel with this, whatever this material is. It's like a netting that had the thermal compound on it. And we're going to just put that over here, and I'm going to grab a paper towel and wipe it down so we can read what CPU this has on it. Now this socket right here, this was for adding cache. If you wanted to make it a little faster, it's like $100 for this cache module. And I never noticed any difference whatsoever in performance with or without it. I forget what they were called, but I'm sure somebody in the chat room will remind me. We certainly made attempts to speed these systems up, but by the time you added that expense, you might as well have just bought, you know, the 486 or whatever. So the thermal paste is not wiping off, so we're just gonna go at it with this rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip and see if I can't scrape this material off of here and get it dissolved. Might need something more powerful. This is on there really, really well. It's been sitting for many years, and I would not expect it to come off easily, but if you're persistent and you put a little elbow grease in it, and if I can see what I'm doing, we should be able to read the CPU cover. Well, they've got it everywhere. It's really on there good. So a material remover like Goof Off would probably do well on here. That would be very unusual to have to use something like that on a CPU, because thermal paste should not be like this, but you can see what it does, or at least what this thermal paste did when it aged. It got very, very dry and became glue-like. But I am making progress here, and hopefully we'll get somewhere with seeing whatever's written underneath. Right now, I don't see any words at all. Now, the other thing you could do if you were getting frustrated and it's on there this hard would be to just grab an object for scraping and see if you can just scrub at it or scrape at it like you would trying to remove paint, which is effectively what it's become. So paint thinner would probably do a good job. Acetone would probably do a good job. There is some writing on here, but it's too small to read. It almost looks like a QR code, but we didn't have QR codes back then. And I don't really want to spend too much time getting this out. Maybe there's something written on the bottom of it. Now this is a pin grid array 370, socket 370, and all the writing is on the bottom of the chip, so I'm wasting my time trying to clear the top. So let me bring this over. You guys can look at this piece of history right here. This is an Intel Celeron. If I can hold it steady long enough. And this appears to be copyrighted in 1998. So we've got parts for 1996, 1997, and 1998. Not everybody used parts that were all made in the same year because we didn't have as many manufacturers, and we also weren't seeing the explosion of the evolution of the parts like we are today. We're a little spoiled today with how quickly things come out and how things don't generally sit on the shelves very long before somebody buys them up. But yeah, that's the Intel Celeron. I was trying to see the model on it. It's really hard for me to see it. I see something about 128 written on it. But we could look that number up if we freeze frame that, and we can figure out exactly what the frequency was on this. But it's really, really slow, I can promise you. Whatever you think is slow, yeah, you don't know if you've never had that. And what remains, of course, is just the rest of the board. The board back then, as I mentioned, we've got an Agp right up here. That's where your graphics card went. We still always install graphics card on the topmost part. That's always your fastest PCI Express. These are PCI. These are what we had before PCI Express, these white ones. And then down here, these were called ISA. And that's what we used originally back when I first started building computers. We only had ISA. And we had VISA. And you thought video cards were big today. You should have seen the length of some of the Voodoo effects and such VISA cards that were out. You'll also notice there are only 3 single inline memory module sockets. So you would often just put one in, whereas today we do duals. So we have 2 typically. Not that you couldn't do one today. And then you would max this out at an odd number, which is 3, not 4. And yeah, there's system 1. Still trying to remember the name of this socket. It was a complete waste. That much I remember. This board still has a couple of jumpers on it. And then your power LED, your reset LED, they're all in a straight line across the bottom of the board. I'll bring this up to you and show you, like today, motherboards have them all grouped together in like a little grid. And back then, they were all just in a straight line, right, like that. And it's identified at the very bottom of the board what's above it. And that's how that worked. All right, so for those of you who weren't around back then, you weren't into computers or you were too young, that's what we used to do. This is part of my career 2 decades ago. 2.5 decades, something like that. I quit counting after a certain, once I get to 21, you know, I run out of numbers. And then that's the old school heatsink. You'll see there's no copper on that anywhere. These chips got hot, but they didn't get as hot as they do today. This would not cut it for us with a modern machine. So let me put this away. Let me clear some space and we'll start up on the next one. Now the next one has got me a little bit frightened. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, so bear with me. This could turn into a horror show. I've got a system that's been kept outdoors in the rain in 110-degree weather for, I don't know, 4 years. And we're going to probably see some very identical technology in here of that same era. We come around the back, you'll see the power supply is a little more modern because it doesn't have the additional output for a monitor. We still have a parallel port, but this does have an Ethernet port. So this one's going to be newer. You see the I/O shield still screws on. It's part of the case. All motherboards use the same I/O shield. This little piece here is what held your cards in, and this one looks like it's got a ATI television card, television receiver card from the looks of it, and then your video output, and then a modem. So even though they started coming with Ethernet, this is sure 10 megabits, not 100 and not 1,000. I'll bet you that's 10. And it would be used in small offices. Very rarely did people use these at home. Now, all these screws can be reused if you're somebody who is starting in this career and you don't have any spare screws. It's easy to buy them on Amazon these days. But back when I started, you couldn't find them. You just had to start collecting extras. And so as a result of that, I've got several pounds of screws that were all just collected. And then I recently, within the last couple of years, had to buy some from Amazon that were black, because all these are silver and they just stand out terribly on a black case, in my opinion. Okay, so let me grab my screwdriver and let's open this up and let's hope nothing crawls out of it that I can't kill. That's all I need is a scorpion nest in there to make my day. Everything's very, very similar. Even the screws that hold the top on, the top of the case screws on. We're just going to take all these out. And once again, if we pull this side off first, you're going to see the back of the motherboard tray. Sometimes these things get real sticky. They don't have anything to pull them with. You have to get a screwdriver. This was very common. And if you weren't careful, you could permanently bend the metal so that when you put it back together, it just looked terrible. So that's the inside of this one, which is surprisingly clean. And I don't see any plastic standoffs poking through this side. Just put that there. We have a 56X CD drive with a volume control for audio. We also have the floppy drive, and then of course the power button and power LED, hard drive LED are right here. That was probably the reset button. I don't know why that has holes in it. It's very strange. All right, here's the scary part. Ugh, that's so gross. Where's Greg Salazar when I need him to clean up this piece of junk? You just take this out and hose it off. So we have a very similar situation, though this is an AMD system. And let's just start taking stuff out of here. The same process is to remove all the cables. So these are our power cables, the ketchup and mustard power cables that everybody loves. These are our IDE cables to the CD drive and the hard disk drive that we no longer use. And a floppy disk cable that has a twisted pair. Well, it's more than a pair. It's got a twist in it, and that identifies you can have two floppy drives, a master and a slave, and whichever one is on the twisted side, that's the master. It was pretty rare anybody had more than one by the time a computer like this was built, we were down to just having one. This floppy drive, again, has those little orange clips. These computers were not owned by people who knew each other. That's just a bizarre coincidence. And I'm going to need a vacuum cleaner when I'm done today. I hope you appreciate the sacrifices I make for you guys. What a mess this is. Oh, glory me, there's a wire tie. Lovely. And another 20-pin power connector to the board. This is probably using DDR2 or DDR3. So you'd have to pick one or the other. You can't use them both. That's what would happen during a changeover. Can you imagine if you have a board that would take DDR4 or DDR5? That'd be kind of cool. Well, too bad. Not going to happen. Now, let's take a look up here. This is our analog audio cable coming out of the back of the CD drive and then going into the sound card, which is built into the motherboard. And that was a real treat back then. That was a real advancement to not have to buy a sound card separately. This is what you would call cable management. Whoever built this wrapped this cable around the power cable, creating a magnetic interference that I'm sure was lovely to listen to. It was probably one of the worst things you can do with an analog audio cable is wrap it around a power cable. But that just goes to show you there were idiots building computers then, and nothing has changed. This is our I/O shield I mentioned before. It's one size fits all. That's how we did it back in the day. Parallel port for your printer. Now this port right here, this was for a MIDI output or a joystick. You'd plug your joystick into this port. Right, it's kind of a funky looking, almost looks like a DVI port before there was such a thing. I don't know anybody who used it for a MIDI. Everybody used it for joysticks that I knew, including me. It's weird, I see dirt shaking off of these screws as they rotate out. That's fine. This is our modem, which... There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. No, that's a video card. Sorry, that's an ATI graphics card. A Rage Pro Turbo Agp graphics card from ATI. That one looks extra tasty. Right up here, we've got a little teeny tiny modem. These modems were often software based. A lot of these would use your CPU power, and then they'd sell these modems for like 15 bucks, and you thought you were getting a deal until every time you connected with it, your system resources got eaten up by about 30 or 40%. And it really slowed a machine down back in the day. Of course, today it wouldn't make much difference on CPU power, but you would never want to use one of those. That's the irony of computing, is by the time your computer can do something easily, it's something you're not interested in doing anymore. Now this, oh, this is a real magic Mpeg 2 DVD decoder. Wow. Wow. That's a real treasure. Holy cow. So you would just, if you wanted to watch DVDs, I'm not quite sure how you would do that, because this didn't have a DVD drive in it. I don't know, someone in the chat can tell me how these were used. I cannot remember. I might have installed 2 of these in my whole career. They weren't real popular. This was a very niche item. Niche? Yeah, whatever. All right, let's take the hard drive out and see what we have in here. Somebody used hot melt glue on these screws. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Okay, that's not good. Why would somebody use hot melt glue on a screw? I don't think they understand how screws work. That's a very strange thing. Let's bring this around and get these out of this side. Oh, well, the good news is they only used hot melt glue on the one side because, you know, it's the left side that's going to come loose. That's called sarcasm. Thank goodness I don't have to turn all these by hand. Oh, good, a floppy drive. I'll just put that with the rest of my floppy drives. And then as far as this one screw I can't get out, I have a special pair of pliers that ought to do the trick. Maybe. See if I'm feeling lucky today. Okay, let's see what happens here. Well, the hot melt glue came off. Come on. There it goes. Yay! And it's an IBM Death Star. Funny, I was just talking about these earlier today. This is a 40 gigabyte manufactured on the 23rd of August, 2002. I'm sure that's not working anymore. Probably didn't work much when it was new. 7,200 RPM. That hasn't changed. Inside, for a motherboard, what do we have here? A K7S5A. Who made this? Oh, it's an ECS motherboard. Oh, yes. When crap was too good for you, you could buy ECS. One of the manufacturers that almost put me out of business as a computer shop owner was my bad judgment in using ECS branded motherboards, because they constantly had problems in my experience. Lots and lots and lots of problems. They often had these SIS chipsets that would constantly cause errors, crashes, and it was the bane of my existence. It almost made me want to quit being a technician. The problem was they sold them so cheap, it was really hard to convince a customer to spend the extra money. And so you either had to support it and sell the customer that, or they let your customer shop somewhere else, or just, for a while I just rolled the dice and went with it, and it did not work out well for me. Now this is a, this power supply I think weighs about 8 ounces. There's not much to it, but that is an Okia switching power supply. 200, was it, how many, 350 watts? Yeah, I don't think so, no. Back in these days, these companies would exaggerate the amount of power their power supplies could deliver. There's no way that could consistently deliver 350 watts. And then we had a switch on the back. Sometimes customers would hit the switch by mistake. It would get moved, and it would get moved to a 230 volt European position. And then their computer wouldn't turn on, and you'd have to check the switch back there, slide it back over to 115. Now, today's power supplies auto-detect the voltage and will automatically adjust without you having to do anything. So we like to keep people as dumb as possible, and as the technology keeps improving, it allows people to get through their life as effortlessly as possible with very little knowledge and no excuse to ever expand your knowledge, as the technology does all your thinking for you, so you don't have to worry about being bothered with thinking. And we can expect more of that in the future. This is a very small fan. This is maybe, I don't know, 40 millimeter fan. These little fans are extraordinarily noisy, and they always ran full speed at all times. What do we have left? We still have that audio cable, that analog CD audio cable. We'll get rid of that. Then we've got our AMD CPU. We'll find out what that is here in just a minute. But these K7S5As, I installed way too many of these, and now I can see we do have the plastic standoffs here, 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 and here, with one screw. No, 2 screws are holding the board in. And that was, no, 3 screws. 3 screws right up the middle are holding this board in place. 1, 2, 3. And then, like I said, the whole board will just come right out, unless I'm missing one somewhere. I am missing one. They used 4 on this one. Look at that. 4 screws and 4 standoffs by the looks of things. And then we still have our front port. You know, there's the speaker, power light, hard drive light, power switch, and reset switch. Now, the original systems I built in the 1991, in that era, the power switch was controlled by a physical toggle switch on the front of the computer. It never was hooked up to the motherboard. It was a big power supply, and it had a 4-wire switch on it, and you had to push the wires on yourself. There's your BIOS chip right there, fan header there. I'm sure this is DDR2 and DDR3. That would be my guess. And then here's your motherboard close up so you guys can see it. Now this dirty, nasty thing. Oh, I didn't take the CD drive out. Let me get that out of there real quick. I'm not happy unless I take everything apart. Take that there. Well, I'll find that later when I'm walking around barefoot. Take that one there. That one there. Two more. There we go. Two. That's just holding this metal top on. Just take that out of there. And there's our CD-ROM drive. From 2002. Well, that's disgusting. I knew it would be. I knew what I was getting into when I agreed to do this, and I thought, that'll make a good video. And after this is done, feel sorry for me as I spend the next half an hour cleaning the desk and getting a vacuum cleaner out to suck up all that dust that I'm sure I'm breathing in. Well, it's the same process for removing the plastic standoffs. As I mentioned, back in the day, every system had these. So you got pretty good at it after a while of just sort of squeezing one end of it and just pulling it out of there like that. Now these look like they might have originally had threaded ends on them that somebody cut off with some wire snips, but I'm not sure. That's pretty unusual for them to have a base like that. I think somebody cut these. But, you know, all they were doing was preventing the back of the board, which is metal, from hitting the back of the motherboard tray, which is metal. That would cause a short circuit. Okay, there's one more right up there. So there were 5 standoffs and 3 screws. That's a lot. For back in this era, that was really unusual. The CPU on, the heatsink rather, on this AMD is going to come off exactly the same way. This power connector does not want to come off. When you get them out in weather like this, they get corroded and rusted, and it just sort of bonds and becomes one. Now this one's interesting. There's a small slot for the screwdriver. I don't know how well you can, you're probably not going to be able to see this. Let's get this RAM out of the way. This RAM is what? Value RAM, KVR 133. I'll bring this up if you guys want to do your own little historical research on what these parts were, if you're interested in the size of the RAM or the speed of the RAM or the type of the RAM. But this was budget. Well, they called it value RAM back then. That means cheap crap. Nobody was looking at performance when you bought stuff like that. That looks like a sim too. Anyway, right in here, there's a little groove. You could stick a screwdriver right in there, and then you push it straight down and pull it away from you at the same time. In theory. There it goes. You have to kind of give it a twist, and it pulls that little tab off. Now, this is an old Athlon that has no heat shield, and it was easy to crack the dies. If you crack the die putting your heatsink on, you basically toasted your CPU out of warranty. You did that. You were not going to get another one free, I'll tell you that. That was your fault because there was no heat spreader. If you did not apply your tension on your heatsink exactly right, you would crack the die. And that was it. CPU's done. and not a warranty issue because you caused it by not knowing what you were doing. That's how it worked back then. Ugh, that's gross. Maybe one more of these will be enough that we can read it. There's more thermal compound around the die than was on the die. Yikes. It's not working too well for me. The thermal compound surrounding the die is getting all over the top when I clean the top, and I so much as touch that stuff on the sides. And it's on there thick enough I can't just pull it off. I'd have to scrape it with a screwdriver. So let me just see if I can maybe use a dry Q-tip. Am I out of Q-tips? Guess I've been doing too much cleaning lately. That means it's time for me to go on vacation when I run out of Q-tips. That should be good enough that we can read it. So there were 4 little rubber pads in each corner of the CPU back in these days. And they're installed by the manufacturer. There's 4 rubber pads. And this is your CPU, which I don't know if anybody can read that. It's really hard for me to read it. So an Athlon. Well, there you go. And of course, the back of your chip look like that. Another one for the archives, huh, guys? Now, the last one I have is also the most disgusting. And the reason is because it was owned by a smoker, and the whole thing reeks. And as soon as I open it, it's going to stink up this whole place. Let me see if I can wash this. What did they say dust is? Old human skin? Let's get that off of me. I have my own. Okay. There we go. Good enough. Yeah, this last one is really bad. And I've already taken the drive out of it. The customer wanted the data. They always want the data off the drives. And so this one was failing, and I was able to recover it. At least I was able to recover the data. And it was one of those situations where, again, the customer was like, you know, if you can get it, great. And if you can't, we're not going to spend any money. This is some old stuff here, folks. And this is how I earned a living 20 plus years ago. Some people don't necessarily believe me that I've been doing this that long, and it's kind of fun and nostalgic for me to pull some of this old equipment up and remember all the things I used to have to deal with, so that when I see the nonsense BS I have to put up with RGB cabling and cable management, you know, we didn't do any of that stuff. That was not done back then. And you can get a good look at, that's just the dust buildup that occurs from smoking, and it causes the dust to be sticky. And you can see it's all over the back of this machine. I'm not going to bother cleaning it. It's just going to go in the recycle bin. You'll see there's no screws holding this together. It's, well, I guess there was. I take it back. There were 2 screws, but there were also these little clips on these. This is like a Dell, I think, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe, I don't know what it is. It's an AMD Athlon X2. Whatever it is, whoever made it, I don't know. It's certainly built like a Dell when they have this kind of nonsense in here, which is supposed to, oh God, there's the cigarettes. Oof. That's just, I mean, that's, imagine what that's doing to somebody's lungs. If it's that bad in the computer, and that's years after it's been exposed, it still reeks really, really bad. Now this one's a bit newer. You see it's got SATA cables. I'm sure it's SATA 1. Oh, jeez. This is really bad. It's like working on an ashtray. It just pops off of there. These were like pull tabs, if I recall correctly. Yeah, you just pull these out to release what's... Yeah, that's all they are. Little pull tabs. They're not supposed to come all the way out. That one's broken. And this is a memory card reader and a floppy drive together in one. Hey, look at that. So it's got an IDE, a floppy cable, a power cable, and a USB cable so that you can read your floppy disks right down here, and then your memory cards up there. Made by Mitsumi, a manufacturer still in business today, I think. I'm not sure they should call themselves Sumi, but you know, what do I know? Optical drive, which is just loose, as you can see. Slide that out. Oh, look at the lovely patina on this one. This is a Light-On 20X DVD-RW. This isn't that old. Manufacturing date, September of 2007. Hey, yeah, we're getting into some modern stuff now, folks. Look at that. Moving on up. Once again, get rid of all the cables, a single power to the motherboard. There's your floppy drive cable. There's your IDE cable. And, oh, you know what? There is CPU power back in these days. It's right down there. That should free us, except for the rear case fan. Now, back then, we started using the motherboards to control the fan speed, so they weren't running full time all the time. And, of course, that was a very welcome thing. You'll see this fan only has 2 screws holding it in, as it had little... It used to have little things that went in there. I think. Who made this? Let's see. Just the cigarette smell on this is really bad. Really, really bad. That cannot go outside fast enough. Now you'll notice we have built-in video, we have a serial port, we have a parallel port for a printer, we have built-in networking, that's probably 100 megabit, not gigabit. We've got 4 USB 2.0s, it looks like, a PS2 for the mouse and keyboard, and then we have our audio connectors, very similar to what we do today, even the power supply. Still not auto switching, you'll see we still have the 115 or 230 volt switch up here. Thank goodness that went away, because that did cause a number of support calls that were just a waste of time to do something that simple. People would unknowingly, I don't know how they were switching them, but they would oftentimes get shifted in shipping or something. I don't know what was happening. SATA cable, it's junk. What else do we have? We have all of our front port power switch, reset switch. We have the front port USBs. This is how we used to hook up USBs. Actually, you were lucky if you had a USB cable like this, because you had the three main cables, your positive, your negative, and then your voltage control, or whatever VCC stood for, and then your ground was separate. But I had cases where you had to hook up all 4 individual cables, and it was confusing because they were 8, and you couldn't mix them. In other words, a series of 4 cables were labeled with the number 1, and a series of 4 cables were labeled with the number 2, on top of having to be plugged into the exact right pin. And if you did it wrong, you could burn out whatever you were plugging into your USB port, like a flash drive. You could just smoke it. We still have that same mounting technique on the AMD here with the latches. We just now have a lever, and with the lever we can no longer need the screwdriver. And you'll see it's a fully aluminum, no copper heatsink here. And that's stock from AMD back in the day. That's the way we had it, and we liked it that way. For RAM, we got a couple sticks here of Crucial, which I'll show you here, like so. Motherboard's an MSI K9VGM-V. And now it's using only screws. You see there's no plastic standoffs. This is when they were phased out. Something in the middle. There we go. I missed one down here. Is this yours? Does this belong to you? Hold on, let me get that off of there. It's really disgusting. Look at that. Isn't that tasty? Okay, so right here you see we still have the back plate, very similar to the back plates we use today. On the back we have the model and serial number of the board. We turn it around the other way. Oh look, we have another one of those big dust goobers right there. Let me clear that off of there so we can read something here. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, ladies and gentlemen. It's how you get work done. And there's a lot of thermal compounds still on there, which I will have to take off so we can read what chip, well, we supposedly know what chip it's got. Every time I look at this, I see another one of these big dust bunnies, and I want to remove it before it falls into my carpeting. Let's see what we can do here. Oh, this is really disgusting. This is really disgusting. Still the same 2032 battery. And let me grab a paper towel and see if I can wipe that thermal compound off of there and see what we can read under there. Since I don't have any more cute, I have cotton balls. All right, let's just grab a paper towel. And we'll take a look at what we got going on under here. Oh, that's working splendidly. Just damp water. Damp water? A damp paper towel. It's doing a great job. Yeah, I like my water damp. I don't like it if it's too wet. I like my ice a little bit warm. Okay. That actually looks better than any other way I've ever done it. All right, here we go. Ugh, I'm starting to drop dust bunnies all over my floor. There you go, folks. This one's about 14, 15 years old. So you can see the progression. You can see what's similar, what's changed. This will help you to identify the direction things are moving in. Bottom of the CPU still has the same sort of little knockouts, the little empty areas, just like AMD's modern Ryzen's do today. AMD hasn't really budged off of that stubbornness. But that's pretty much it. I have another system here that has to be, I need the data pulled off with a drive. Now this last system, I'm not going to dismantle it. The customer wants it back. It's old, but it's not as old. But I'll let you just soak that bad boy in, huh? Ooh, jealous much? Probably not. All right, so I haven't really been paying much attention into the chat because I've been so focused trying to minimize the amount of debris that's falling around here. I'm going to massively need an air purifier in here before too long. But if anybody has any questions for me, please feel free to ask now. Or if you had asked and I hadn't seen it, please ask again. Just kind of looking through the chat. It doesn't let me go back that far. And I apologize if I missed any super chat contributions. You'll have to remind me. Lance was mentioning the 133 megahertz SD RAM. That's right. Correcting me, it was before DDR. I called them SIMs, single inline memory modules. A lot of good information there. A lot of people recognizing some of this old hardware. Rick Hubbard with a 5-pound contribution. Hey, Rick, thank you, as always, watching us from Great Britain. I noticed there's really no go faster stickers on anything, and that's how you know they run slow. Eduardo says that's an AMD Athlon 800 megahertz CPU. Someone's saying 1.8 gigahertz. That was maybe on that. Was it that fast? Rick Lakes says, my God, that looks nasty. You should smell it, Rick. Lance says, Carrie, you need gloves. I'm a tough guy. I'm from the 80s. You don't need no stinking gloves. That's why I have something called an immune system. Carrie, get out the leaf blower. Not inside the house. He says, it is a Dell. I just replaced that model for my daughter. All right, Edwin. I thought it was a Dell, but I don't see the words Dell anywhere on it. Matt says, I hope Carrie has a dumpster. Yeah, not as much as Carrie hopes he has a dumpster. What screwdriver am I using? It's a Milwaukee M4, just like the rifle. I'm going to have to clean my driver. It's covered in dust. I got to get some Windex out and clean this thing now. It's gross. And this cigarette smell is hitting me right in the face. I got to get this case outside. So we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. So I'll remind you again, if you have any questions for me, please ask them now, because I seriously need to get some fresh air. This is really bad. And I'm going to have to turn some fans on and cycle the air in here because it's really, really bad. Bryant Burns contributes $5. Bryant, thank you. And Rick Lakes with $5. He says, thank you. No thanks, he says. I dealt with computers that smelled like smoke. Yeah, but this one's extra smoke. This one's practically... I'm trying to think of something funny and nothing's happening. It's practically barbecue. It's smoked so well. John Lewis says, Carrie, thanks for making me laugh. Hey, you're welcome. I'm glad I can inhale a little bit of cancer if it makes your day a little happy. Richard Bogan said, Carrie, I sent you $5 and told you that old case would be great for the gun range and thanked you for the nostalgic video today. Yeah, unfortunately, all the gun ranges around us are closed for fire hazards. And yeah, I think I'm just going to put them out of their misery into the trash can. Now, when I get things cleaned up, I'll come back. I'll show you how I'm going to try and recover data off of this IDE drive. Chevy with a $1 contribution. Thank you, Chevy. Peter Dobson wants to know, do those have a south and a north bridge? Probably, yeah. What's happening with all those parts? They're going into a recycling bin. Now, if you like videos like this, you can let me know by hitting the thumbs up button below the video, which kind of looks like, come on, I have a like button here somewhere, don't I? Looks like that. There you go. And if you want to see when I'm live next time or anytime I post new content, be sure and hit the subscribe button. And if you don't tap the bell will be hollow. When you tap it, it'll turn solid, at least on the desktop, and then turn all the notifications on, because you have to like go these extra steps. Otherwise, YouTube gets accused of spamming people. So you have to do it to yourself, basically. So you hit the subscribe button, the bell is hollow, you hit the bell, and then 3 options appear. Select all notifications if you want to be notified, and you have to do that for each channel you want notifications from. Just subscribing to the channel will not notify you by default. You'd have to manually look at your subscriptions to see what's new, unless you go out of your way to click that option for all notifications for each channel you subscribe to that you want notifications from. Bryant Burns with 99 cents, and again with $2. Thank you, Bryant. Thanks for supporting the channel. John Williams says, Carrie, I'm glad I quit smoking a long time ago. Thanks for all you do. I love your live stream. Thank you, John. I'm glad you quit smoking too. Calvin says, love your videos, Carrie. Thank you, Calvin. A name I can't pronounce says, thanks for the stroll down memory lane. And Richard Irvine says, thanks for the info. Disney fan wants me to power up that IBM drive. Yeah. And again, a $3 contribution from Bryant Burns. Thank you, Bryant. Patrick Holcomb says, great video, Carrie. Thank you, Patrick. Vern says, I'm thinking that at one time that stuff was state of the art. It certainly was. Unfortunately, YouTube won't show any contributions to me that aren't in the buffer of the chat. And there's no way for me to see them. So if people don't tell me about contributions I've missed, I have no way to acknowledge them for you, unfortunately. That's something YouTube is just, I don't know. They just, they had a system that was working and it hasn't worked for about 2 months now, and I don't know why. And I've tried it on different machines, so I know it's not the configuration on my end. It's just universally not working. Jimmy says the Samsung Evo 970 is back over $300. I don't believe that's true. I think you're looking at the wrong. It's important you use my links. If you don't use my links, you are not going to get to the right product page if you're doing your own searching. But let me just verify that. No, it's $249. It's still $249. Again, use my links. Use my links. First of all, you're typing in something wrong. Secondly, I'm not going to get the commission. And third, you're not even looking at the thing I'm talking about. So on Amazon.com, I'm looking at it right now. It's $249. It's been $249 all day. It's going to stay $249, I'm sure, for the rest of this. Well, I can't say I'm sure for the rest of this week, but I would expect it to be $249 until it sells out. That's what I think is going to happen. However, it could change at any time. But I don't know where anybody is, it's really important you don't listen to random strangers on the internet. I keep telling this to people. They don't know what they're talking about. They make mistakes. Either they're doing it on purpose or they have the best of intent, but they're just really negative people. And instead of asking questions, they make accusations and false statements. So be aware that that is rampant across the internet. There's almost no way around it. And the best thing for you is to not take anybody's word for anything, but check it yourself, experience it yourself. And that includes everything I tell you. Don't let anybody in my chat room challenge or override me in your own beliefs. You need to check it yourself. Vincent Massey contributes $5. He says, thanks for all the good years. I learned well from you. Right on, Vincent. Let's make sure you're blue in here. I appreciate that very much. Let's see what else we've got here. Put a patch on that system, Robert Jones says. Oh, it's going to get a patch, all right. Patch right into the trash can. Right into the recycle bin. I think a lot of this stuff won't even get recycled. I think when you give it to the recycler, it ends up in the dump because it costs more to recycle it, like steel, than it does to just make new steel. And in fact, it's worse on the environment too. Aluminum is different. Aluminum is good, but you might be surprised where some of that stuff goes that you take to the recycler. But that's not my responsibility. It goes to the recycling bin, and where it goes from there, it's not my decision. But I'm not going to kid myself and think I'm doing the environment a good thing. I just don't want to consume all the space on my trash can. Let's not kid each other. Rick Lake says, yeah, the YouTube activity history of super chats isn't working for anyone on YouTube, and Tech Deals complained about it the other day. Yeah, well, like I said, I've tried it on 2 different systems. It's very frustrating. Thank you, Rick. Have I considered using Streamlabs for contributions? I've considered it. I really don't have time. And it makes it feel a little, when you, with a lot of Streamlabs views, streams that I see, they have a very immature, comic-y, gimmicky, cartoonish, annoying video overlays and sounds. So I think if it's done very modestly, it can work. I just don't have time right now. Any good links to Corsair's 200R? That's what the Borgman wants to know. Well, we're living in the midst of a pandemic, and I think you guys, many of you just seem to be living in some form of delusion as though it's not happening. The issues we're having with distribution make this a very poor time to buy certain things like kitchen appliances, automobiles, even junked cars at junkyards are 20% more money now than they were. This is not an ideal time to buy. And if you're going to buy, this is not a time to shop around for the best price for things like, well, a Corsair 200R, even air conditioner parts. You could have to wait a month to get an air conditioner part. Everything is selling out because the problems we're having in distribution, getting stuff here, is very, very, very hindered by the pandemic. As a result, you can go on Amazon right now and buy a 200R and it'll cost you nearly about twice what it would normally cost. Now you can get the Be Quiet Pure Base. I think like the 600 is fairly equivalent to a 200R. It just doesn't have any front bays on it, but you can always plug stuff in via USB for anything you wanted in a front bay. Otherwise, you need to sit tight or pay the money. Those are your two options. There's no secrets. Nobody's got them because they aren't there to be had. And it's just sort of like looking for concert tickets after the concert is over. You're looking for a price on good seats to a sold-out concert, maybe a better example. It's sold out. All the seats are gone. You're not going to find a good price from a scalper, right? You're going to pay more because the supply and demand is the fact that there's way, way more, so much more demand than there is supply. So either be patient or pay the money. That's my advice. Plague Doctor says, Carrie, I don't have to buy the 970 today because I bought it the last time you advertised it. Well, let's be clear. I'm not advertising the 970. I'm letting my friends know about a good deal, the same way you might tell your friend about a sale you saw at the store. I don't know why everybody turns it into some sort of paid advertisement because I'm just looking out for you. But I guess that's maybe not what you meant, but I'm a little sensitive to it because I've been unfairly accused of things that simply aren't true without any evidence or proof. But people still open their mouths when they have no business making accusations that are completely delusional. And it's very, very frustrating for me to try and help somebody. And you're reaching out to help them, you're reaching your hand out and they're smacking your hand away. And you're like, well, fine then, drift into the ocean. I don't care. It's not my problem. I offered you a hand. Well, who paid you to offer me your hand? Clearly you got a contract, you're a sponsor from Isotoner Gloves. The world we're living in is getting really, really bad. So I want you guys to know about the deal because I care about you and I want you to be aware of it. And yeah, I'm going to make a little commission on it. Why shouldn't I? You wouldn't want me to? That's how you treat your friends? So, there's some people out there, you wonder if that's how they treat their friends. What must it be like to be their enemy? So anyway, it's a great deal. I highly recommend you buy it. All you got to do is look at the pricing history of that drive. At 250, there's nothing close to it that runs at that speed. And any sort of negativity at that is just, like I said earlier, there are people, a lot of people in the world that when opportunity knocks, they complain about the noise. Recognize those people and remember who they are. Because every time they ever say anything again, you should completely dilute it by remembering what they've already said. Keep that in mind. Keep a record of who you can trust and who has a serious delusion and entitlement issues. But be that as it may, it's not my problem. And I'm glad to continue to help people despite the tiny bit of people that want to try and demonize me for it. It's bizarre. Calvin says he's watching me from Scotland, been into computer repair for years, just watching your video. I'm currently using Windows Vista, running Windows 10 Pro and Intel Quad 2 Q8300 with 8 gigs of DDR2. You must be a patient man. Patrick Russo says, thank you for telling us about the Samsung deal. And you will be doing an Amazon, will you be doing an Amazon video about it? Time permitting, I intend to, yeah. Vincent wants to know if memory prices are going up or down. They've been pretty stable. It's about, I want to say it's about $80 for 16 gigs. It's been pretty stable, for me anyway, for at least a year. Whether or not they're going up or down, they don't seem to be doing either. They seem pretty stable. What is a 200R, he wants to know. That's a computer case made by Corsair. A business style computer case with no case window, no RGB, and lots of room for expansion and airflow. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you so much for your kind words. I appreciate your support. And thanks for hanging out with me and kind of going through the history of computers and my personal history and my past as a professional working computer technician in this industry. being paid full time since 1991 to do this work. And this kind of is a walk down memory lane for me. What I've got to do next, of course, is to get all this dust cleared out of here and get these cases thrown into the recycle bin. And then beyond that, I've got to get this hard drive, which is IDE, into a hard drive toaster, a USB hard drive toaster with an IDE to SATA adapter, which I'll show you. I think I've already got a video on it if you want to jump ahead. And I'm going to try and pull the customer's data off of there onto like a flash drive. And then I need to do the same thing to this machine here. I don't actually have to power it on. Just need to extract the data off of the drive, not the files of Windows or applications or programs, but the user directory that contains the documents, the pictures, the music, stuff like that. Then that's all going to go into the new machine that's already built for them using the 8-year build with a Generation 9, H370 HD3 and a 200R. I still have about 4 200Rs left, I think. And I think they're all spoken for. I'm not sure yet, but I can't sell them because I have customers here locally that want to buy them, and I don't want to tell the customer they have to pay $120 for it when it's a $70 case. So in any event, I don't know if I'll be able to film this or not. I don't want to expose any of the customer data, but I can show you guys the IDE to SATA adapter. StarTech makes it, and I do believe I already have a video showcasing it from many years ago. It's something I don't use very often for obvious reasons. It's been a long time since I've seen an IDE drive, but as a working computer technician, I never know what a customer's going to bring in. I don't even know that that drive even works. But at the very least, what I need to do is plug that into a standard USB drive toaster and into a working computer. Hopefully I'll see the files and folders, extract the user directory off of that onto a flash drive, and then I'll be done with it. And I'll give the data, the drive rather, back to the customer, recycle everything else, because I don't want to be held accountable for any data theft. So I'm not going to destroy the drive or erase the drive unless I'm paid to do that. That'll be the customer's responsibility if the drive works. Even if the drive doesn't work, it still goes back to the customer. It does not belong to me. And I don't want that responsibility as a professional hobbyist. I don't have to worry about stuff like that. I do. And that's why I make these videos, to keep emphasizing what that difference is and why it's so critically different in the amount of experience I have, the amount of work I do, and the amount of accountability, reliability, and liability that I have in the work that I do. So there it is right in front of you, right? I'm so tired of explaining it, I thought I'd just try and show you. It wouldn't be uncommon for a system I built similar to what I've taken apart to come back to me, 5 years later for an upgrade or a repair. And so that's why I talk about accountability. In fact, if it doesn't come back to me, it's probably because the customer may not be happy with your service or found better service somewhere else. It's hard to stay in business like that. In the meantime, thanks for all the contributions. Thanks for all of your kind words and support. And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Remember to check out my Amazon Live channel and my Amazon store. The screwdriver I use, all the tools I use, I purchase them all from Amazon. I make a small commission if you buy anything from Amazon using my link, and it doesn't even matter what it is you buy. It could be something entirely not on my Amazon store, but because it's my link that took you to Amazon, I make a small commission. So if you want to support the channel that way, I'll never know who you are, but I can see what was purchased and when, and it adds up if enough people use it. Very easily, you can go to amazon.com/shop/Kerry Holzman. One word. If you spell it correctly, you'll see my storefront and my videos are there, and my Amazon videos are different from my YouTube videos. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.